welcome to episode 167 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with...
Lydia Creech. Bye.
Jessica Carr.
And Andrew Swafford.
And in today's episode, we will be talking about movies we saw this week in part one, specifically a recap of the Knoxville Horror Film Festival. And in part two, we will be joined by Darren Hughes and Diana Rogers to talk about Trouble Every Day, the 2001 Claire Denis film, as part of our October horror series. I'm a little taken aback since Lydia said bye and now we're starting this episode. Well, it's
time is very it's operating in a very strange way on this podcast. It would take too long to explain.
That's true. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jessica and Andrew, who attended the Knoxville Horror Film Festival, which we had William Mahaffey, the founder, come on a couple weeks ago to talk about it. Give us a little recap of your time at the film festival.
All right. So before we give our recap, I just want to give a shout out to Knoxville Horror Film Festival director / guest of the podcast / founder of Central Cinema, William Mahaffey. He graciously gave us 2 press passes for the festival. So thank you for those. I thought it was really funny when we found out that we got the press passes, because technically it's Cinematary's first set of passes that we've ever gotten. And I was texting Andrew, and Andrew was like, "We are serious business now." So apparently we're serious business. So Andrew and I attended the festival. It kicked off on Friday the 20th with Dario Argento's Suspiria. And it ended on the 22nd with Hausu. Out of the 10 feature films that were screened, Andrew and I got to see 6 of them total. And 6 out of 10 I thought was pretty good. We spent most of the weekend just watching movies and then trying to eat before the next movie that we had to go to. So that was... pretty interesting. I've been to film festivals before, but never where I really wanted to go to most of the screenings. So we really had to manage our time well. Right, Andrew?
Yeah. And the Horror Fest is pretty packed. I mean, they do it all in one weekend. 10 feature films, over 40 short films. There's also a competition section of the weekend where they have independent filmmakers come in and screen films that they made under a 6-day time constraint. And there's award ceremonies and costume contests and all this stuff. It's just a lot to pack into one weekend. And they're actually considering expanding it to a full week or even longer next year, which may be facilitated by the fact that William Mahaffey and Nick Hinker, the other sponsor of the fest, are opening Central Cinema next January here in Knoxville, so they'll have more of a dedicated space. Maybe that'll happen. I liked being able to marathon it over the course of the entire weekend, just so I didn't really have to balance it with, school and work life and things like that. I could just turn off all of those other parts of my life and just enjoy weird horror movies for 3 days straight. But yeah, we got to see Suspiria, we got to see Hausu, the 2 repertory picks, both of which came out in 1977. We also got to see Tragedy Girls, Spookers, Better Watch Out, and Blade of the Immortal, which were all new releases and premieres for this region anyway. So Jessica, you want to get us into our first review?
Yeah, so I think I can probably start with Tragedy Girls, because it was probably my favorite out of the 4. I'm not going to include Suspiria or Hausu because I feel like they're kind of in a league of their own. So out of the other 4 feature films, I feel like Tragedy Girls was probably the most entertaining to me. So the film is directed by Tyler McIntyre. It follows 2 best friends in high school who basically murder their way to social media stardom. It's a kind of a play on just a traditional slasher film. I really love the opening of the movie because it starts out kind of like just a regular slasher film with 2 teenagers and making out in the car in the middle of nowhere at night. And then the girl like turns to the guy and she's like, "Do you hear that sound?" And the guy's like, "Oh, I don't know what it is." And she's like, "Oh, well, you should check that out." And instead of him just being like, "Oh yeah, I totally should," he's kind of like, "Why should I be the one to go look at this?" And he barely leaves his car, and then he turns around and just gets a machete in the face. And so I feel like this just sets the tone that you know that this is going to be a horror movie, but it's also going to be funny. So then in that scene, you slowly kind of realize that Sadie, the girl in the car, is actually in on the whole thing. And her and her best friend, Michaela, kidnap a murderer who's been going around town killing people. And they actually want him to mentor them. They have a blog and a bunch of social media accounts for their brand name called Tragedy Girls, where they post updates on what this town's killer has been running around doing. I felt like this script was pretty tight in terms of like the witty dialogue. I thought that it was entertaining from start to finish. My critique would be I do think that the satire should have been tighter. I don't think it really makes as big a statement on social media as other films like Ingrid Goes West, for example. I think it kind of plays around with the idea, but it isn't really solid. I think it kind of caters more to like what interesting kills we can get in here and like what kind of horror movie references we can include. So, Andrew, what did you think?
I definitely agree that the satire is super muddy, to the point where it almost feels like it's satirizing two opposite things. Like at times it is satirizing the the local news and like the idea of them being so clueless to things that are happening, like young girls killing people right under their noses, and they just don't pay it any mind because of their preconceived assumptions about these people. But on the other hand, it's showing this false social media campaign to like stir up some sort of public outcry about political corruption or whatever, and it almost feels like, can you skewer the mainstream media and like Black Lives Matter at the same time? Like it feels like those are the two poles that it's dealing with, and it doesn't quite pick a side ever. Maybe it's not trying to, but the whole film does play very much like a satire. And I think a satire like Dr. Strangelove or Great Dictator or To Be or Not to Be or something like that needs to be very pointed in a way. And this doesn't have that. The plot structure is a little bit repetitive as well. I mean, maybe that's just the nature of it being a slasher movie, and you just have this this meandering structure of like kill after kill after kill, and just trying to find more ways to make that interesting. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. But I will totally echo the sentiment that this movie is super funny and super charismatic and just a very entertaining film to watch, even though if you take a step back and look at it as a whole, it doesn't necessarily work on a structural level. But I definitely had a lot of fun watching it, and I think that this is a movie that would be super successful if it was played wide. And I'm really surprised that it does not have a distributor yet. I don't know if it has a distributor yet, but it's not playing, for example, in the Regal cinemas in Knoxville.
No,
for the most
it's
part.
getting a wider release.
Is it? I know that.
Yeah, they just announced that it's getting a wider release, and it's supposed to be playing at Downtown West soon.
Okay, I knew it was playing at Downtown West, and I was wondering if that was a special case just because it did so well at the horror festival. But that is good that it's getting put in front of more audiences, because I think people are going to enjoy the heck out of this movie. And mostly the thing that I think works the most about it is the charisma of the two leads. Those two actresses totally deserve to be superstars. They sell every minute of their time on screen, and they have a relationship and this chemistry that almost reminds me of the central relationship in Tangerine, which is a hard line to walk, and they do it really well.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what other parts they get. I think one of the actresses was in Deadpool, I'm pretty sure.
The one actress was in Deadpool, and the other actress was in X-Men Apocalypse.
Dead air for X-Men Apocalypse. We have 5 more movies to talk about, or 4 more movies to talk about, 3 more movies to talk about. So let's go to let's talk about Spookers, which is a documentary from New Zealand. It is about actors who work at haunted attractions, so not places that are actually haunted, but fake, phony haunted houses that people set up that you can walk into and like listen to chainsaws revving in the background and things like that.
Yeah, but they specifically work at Spookers in New Zealand, so one haunted attraction.
This thing is a huge deal. It is an institution, and it is set in a prior mental institution. It's called Kingsport or Kingsbridge or something like that. This mental hospital, they got shut down when a lot of big changes to the way that we dealt with mental health were happening legally, like not just in America, obviously, because it's a New Zealand documentary, but around the world, like a lot of new discoveries about misunderstandings that we had about mental health. We shut down all these quote unquote insane asylums, and so this house has just been sitting dormant, or this large compound has been sitting dormant, and the people who own Spookers decided that would be an appropriate place to have this really elaborate haunted house attraction. So they've hired all of these actors. They give the actors complete creative and artistic freedom to make their faces up however they want, to use whatever kind of costumes they would like to create, to play any characters that they would like to develop, and really make this a unique and an unforgettable experience for people who are going to the haunted house. And the way the movie, the way it works as a documentary is it gives you these brief biographies of maybe 4 or 5 different people who work at Spookers, just giving them time to talk about what their life was like before they started working there, how working there has affected their life, whether that be their nightmares or their self-confidence or their sense of belonging or whatever. A lot of it has to do with self-esteem. And one thing, a trend that you start to notice as you get introduced to more and more people is that quite a few of them belong to some sort of community that has been marginalized in some way. So, for example, you have some actors that are gay, actors that are transgender, actors that are HIV positive. What was the woman who used to work for an insurance firm? Was there anything of particular interest about her background, or am I forgetting?
She tried to commit suicide before, and while she was working at Spookers, and the 2 owners of Spookers visited her at the hospital, and she said that it kind of like turned her life around and made her realize that she was really valued at this job and that people actually cared about her. Right.
So it's this very inspirational documentary showing a non-nuclear family that develops amongst all of these quote-unquote misfits and outcasts of the world who get together and dress up like monsters and quote-unquote freaks, and really embrace that and get to find a new sense of confidence and belonging that they didn't necessarily feel in their civilian life before this. And it's a pretty heartwarming and personal documentary that I quite enjoyed getting a chance to watch. I do think that, like Tragedy Girls, the way that it's structured and just going from this little unit of a biography of somebody and then another biography of somebody, another biography of somebody, it doesn't necessarily have this forward motion to it. And your level of enjoyment of the film just rests on how much you are interested in the particular person that you're hearing about in that moment. So it is hit or miss depending on the section of the film that you are in. I think it could be a little bit more tightly structured. And there is one particular quibble I have with it, which is that at one point they bring on an expert in mental health, and then at another point they bring on somebody who used to be a patient at the mental hospital that used to exist there. And during that section, they talk about how this whole idea of like lunatics in the insane asylum and using this place as a place where like monsters and quote unquote crazy people live further stigmatizes mental health and discourages people from actually seeking mental health because they don't want to be seen as a psycho or a freak or whatever. And the movie backpedals from that very quickly. It can't quite reconcile the idea that this place is giving a platform to people who have been underrepresented, while also putting forward the idea that they are maybe further marginalizing another group. And that did hamper my experience with the movie just a little bit, because I feel like, I don't know, you have this documentary nonfiction format. You could really delve into the social angle of that, considering you already are focusing on this other social angle. And it feels a little timid to me that it's not quite willing to fully explore that idea. But still a really, like, again, personal, heartfelt documentary. It's available on Shudder. People can go like get a free trial or subscribe to Shudder and watch it. Jessica, you liked this a little bit more than I did. So any other thoughts about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really a documentary person. I don't really know that much about like documentary structure or any of the technical aspects or anything like that. But I love people from New Zealand because they're just so sweet and so just charming. And I felt that from all of the characters in this. And I felt like the filmmakers were empathetic towards their struggles, and they really wanted to highlight these people and their lives. And I just thought it was really nice. I'm not really, when I first saw the trailer for this, like, I was really scared with the opening of it, because I think it's just one of the actors like popping out, and their makeup is really scary. And I was like, I don't know if I want to watch this.
Oh yeah, they don't skimp on the budget.
Yeah, and like the opening scene of the documentary is just them like dancing in the dark, like holding the title cards, and so that was really cute. And I also really liked, they had these like slow-mo shots of like people's reactions in the haunted house, and I thought that was hilarious, because it was people just getting scared. But I agree with it in terms of, like, I didn't really know where it was going in terms of structure. But overall, I think it's a really good documentary to watch, especially if you want to get in the Halloween spirit.
Yes, good Halloween movie, and nice if you just want to listen to New Zealand accents for an hour and a half, which is always a positive. Should we talk about Better Watch Out or Blade of the Immortal?
I could quickly talk about Blade of the Immortal. I'm not sure all of what I'm going to say. I definitely won't talk about it for as long as it is, because it is a 2-hour and 30-minute movie. But apparently it's Takashi Miike's 100th film, which that number was crazy to me. I had no idea. I've only seen one of his films, and I've talked about it on the podcast before. I've seen Audition, and this is the second film that I've seen by him. So Blade of the Immortal, it came out this year. It follows a character called Manji, and he's cursed with immortality in feudal Japan, and he promises to help a young woman named Ren to avenge the death of her parents. Basically, he's being kept alive by bloodworms, apparently, which is the only, like, the bloodworms, all of the blood and gore, and all of the severed limbs, those are the 3 reasons why this, to me, was put at a horror film festival. Otherwise, it's just like a drama action kind of film.
Way more severed limbs than you could possibly expect. I mean, I said it in my piece about the horror festival, which is that every human's anatomy in this movie is the Black Knight from Monty Python's Holy Grail, just falling apart at the slightest touch of a weapon.
Yeah, and I mean, he's immortal. So, and I really like the opening of this movie because it starts in black and white, and it is this big battle scene where he just demolishes a bunch of men, a bunch of samurai, and then he sees, there's a longer story to this, it's a little bit more complicated, but he sees his sister, who's not really his sister, it's really the wife of a man who he killed, but he sees his sister get killed, and then he just, demolishes all of these men, and then he's basically there left dying, but a witch, I guess, is what she is. I don't know, she kind of...
I don't know if the mythology of the film necessarily matters that much.
She kind of looked like a little Pokemon to me because she had like swirls on her face and a little hood. But she puts these blood worms in him that make him immortal. So throughout the movie, he's just dying over and over and over again. He's getting, stabbed. He's getting his limbs cut off. And he even meets another person in the film who's immortal, and they battle, and that is like, it becomes kind of a joke because Rin like walks in on them, and like they both have just tons of swords stuck in them, and they're kind of like trapped in this weird like sword pretzel.
Though they wrap up that conflict way too soon though. Like it appears once that is introduced that this is going to be this unstoppable force versus an immovable object for the rest of the 90 minutes that you still have left in the runtime, and then 5 minutes later the other guy is just dead. And then we just have to deal with the main character's immortality for the rest of the time.
Yeah, so that was my main problem with the movie, is it's 2 hours and 30 minutes, and they don't really explore any one particular thing. Like, you think that there's going to be this big kind of exploration of immortality, and they kind of touch on it here and there, but it kind of slowly, like, disappears. And you just have really repetitive scenes where it's just Manji versus a giant league of men, like over and over and over again.
There's sections of the film that touch on thematic material about violence, thematics about government, even like maybe some gender role stuff at one point or another, but I completely agree that it doesn't commit to any of these specific directions. And I think that at this point, it's sort of a victory lap for Takashi Miike. He is just making this big, bloody spectacle movie that is going to be as long as he wants it to be. At times, it feels like a Kurosawa film, but a Kurosawa film like turned up past 11. And it feels a bit like... I don't want to say an indulgence because that has a negative connotation, but it does feel like Takashi Miike making some sort of an ultimate Takashi Miike film. Whether or not a general audience will like that or not, this may just be for his diehard fans. But I had a good enough time with it. I especially like the sense of style and mood that the movie created. It is just so meticulously designed. I love all the robes that they're wearing. I love the crazy weird weapons that he designs for this film. I love all the punk futurist hairstyles that these people have that are totally anachronistic for the time period. I love the fight sequences where a musical instrument turns into a weapon out of nowhere, but I did feel very exhausted and a little bored by the film once we started to enter the third act. And it doesn't necessarily reward closer attention just because there isn't that depth there.
Yeah, but shout out to the hair department because the hair in that movie is so creative and so weird. There's one guy who looks like Sonic the Hedgehog.
And another where he has a samurai top knot that wraps all the way around his head and becomes a pompadour. It's insane. It's so good.
Yeah.
So guys, we have about 5 minutes, so do that with what you have left.
All right, Andrew, kick off Better Watch Out.
My favorite movie of the festival was Better Watch Out, which is a Christmas home invasion horror film that I don't want to say too much about because it's an easily spoilable film. It has at least 2 twists in it, but all you really need to know is the premise of a kid who's maybe 14, 15 years old, is about to be babysat by a babysitter he has a crush on. Babysitter shows up, and then a slasher / home invasion movie happens from there. And after the movie ended, I felt kind of gross. The movie has a bit of a black heart at its center, I think. But the more time I get away from it, the smarter I think the movie is, and the more well-made I think the movie is. We've talked about Spookers and Tragedy Girls and Blade of the Immortal all being a little poorly structured and having some dead air in their runtime, and Better Watch Out has none of that. It is so tight. It is so well designed from beginning to middle to end, both in terms of a plot standpoint and in terms of camera work and in terms of thematics. Like, everything means something. Everything is in the movie for a specific reason. And I was just really impressed by... I am ultimately, after getting some distance from it, very impressed by just what the film was able to accomplish in a very short time. Jessica, any last words on Better Watch Out?
I agree with that. I think we talked about it without going into spoilers. I think my biggest issue with this, and you said that you felt gross after watching it, and I think the reason why is we spend so much time with the most sadistic character, and I wasn't really sure, based on the end credit scene, if the director was really giving us any justice at the end of the movie. And I think that if you were to cut that one end credit scene, then I think that it would make it completely different for me.
And I think that part of the grossness and part of the black heart of the movie is that there is a captured female character at one point in the film, and it really, really wants you to hate her captor. And it makes you spend a lot of time with that captor, and even frames them in some really beautiful ways at times. Like, there's this slow motion scene set to music and a dance that is kind of breathtaking filmmaking, but the fact that we're using that on this character is weird. And it doesn't truly humanize that woman character. I mean, she doesn't have much of a personality, even though everybody else in the film does have a very unique and easily identified quirk about them or archetype that they are going for. And you don't necessarily get that with her. And I think that is a void at the center of the movie, that if it was filled, it would be just that much better. But I do think that in general, what the movie does, it does really effectively.
I agree. And it's on iTunes, right?
It is available, I think, on iTunes and Amazon VOD. I think you can access most of these films on streaming one way or another. I don't know about Tragedy Girls, though. And of course, people should go listen to our Suspiria episode if they haven't. They should watch House if they haven't, especially if you're having a lot of friends over for a Halloween party or something. That is the perfect film to watch there. But again, thank you, William Mahaffey, for hooking us up with press passes. There will probably be more writing to come about movies from your fest. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, everybody go check out my essay, which is on the site right now. And then I guess we're going to have more writing that's going to appear soon.
That's all we got, Zach.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have nothing. All right, we're going to take
You got cannibalism.
Yeah, we got some cannibalism to talk about. We're going to take a short break. Thank you, Andrew and Jessica. They're going to drop out, and Darren and Diana are going to come on to talk about 2001's Trouble Every Day for our October horror series. So stick around. Hello, Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is Zach Dennis with an important message because I have not talked to you enough during this episode. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money. We're not clamoring for your dollars. At this time, we just want to enjoy each other's company and talk about the movies and feel our, distribute our thoughts to the world and become podcasting moguls. Simple stuff. No money involved. However, there are a few things that you could do to help out the show. We would really appreciate it. The first thing is review us on iTunes. I know literally every podcast asks you this. They're like, please review us on iTunes. But it's like important because I don't know, iTunes, this is just what they do. This is how the Apple lords constrict us and keep us in their system. That's just what happens. So we need a nice little review. Just take like 2 minutes one day, be like, this is podcast review time. Put us on the list. Secondly, you can tweet us. We're at Cinematary on Twitter, or better yet, send us an email. We're cinematary@yahoo.com so we can hear from you. If you're just like Zach, you have terrible taste. Why do you keep talking about these superhero movies? You keep talking about these Japanese movies where all they do is drink sake and smoke cigarettes and talk about how life's awful. And I'll be like, yeah, but you're wrong. And you'll be like, yeah, but I'm just emailing you. And it'll be a whole thing. It'll be a nice discourse. Think about it. And finally, please tell your friends and family, they should know as well. I'm sure they like movies. I'm sure they like podcasts. We don't know. To recap, review on iTunes review day. Do that. Secondly, send your thoughts, Twitter, email, one of those. Do it. Third, share with your friends and family. We would love it. Do it. Please. Thank you. Now, let's get back to the show. And welcome back to part 2 of episode 167 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be continuing our October horror series with 2001's Trouble Every Day. In this part, we are glad to be joined by 2 guests. We have Darren Hughes, who's regular on the podcast. But for the first time, we are joined by Diana Rogers. Diana, thank you so much for coming on and joining us to talk about this movie.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Very happy.
So I have a like usual. I have a short info sheet. Just going to be up front and say a lot of French names. I will butcher a lot of these. I know how to say Claire Denis though, so I'm covered there. But yeah, Trouble Every Day. It's directed by Claire Denis. She also wrote the script with her, frequent collaborator Jean-Paul Fargo. Did I nail that?
Just keep going.
Yes. The movie stars Vincent Gallo, Trisha Vissay, Beatrice Dali, and Alex Descas. And the film follows an American couple, Dr. Shane Brown and his wife June, who go to Paris supposedly for their honeymoon. But in reality, Shane has traveled to Paris to hunt down neuroscientist Dr. Leo Simoneau and his wife Cora, whom he once knew and was obsessed with. And I guess, cough, cough, she's a cannibal. That's, little low key.
Is he obsessed with the wife or with the doctor?
I think I want to say the wife because he seems to really target her.
Oh, okay. I couldn't tell.
He's looking for the doctor in order to find the cure.
He's obsessed with her because he had the same condition as her.
Okay, I thought he was obsessed with the doctor because the doctor might cure him. And maybe he didn't, that description is so interesting because, I didn't really pick up on any of that. Okay.
He went to see the doctor, to find the cure. I didn't pick up on him being obsessed with her. She just happened to have the same condition that was more advanced than his condition had advanced at that point. Does that make sense?
I get.
Yeah, that's kind of how I read.
I have multiple questions about this entire movie, so we'll definitely get to that and clarify that. The title of this film comes from one of the sources says it comes from a Frank Zappa song of the same name from the album Freak Out. But I also saw that the titular trouble originates from the original haunting quasi-elegiac score by the British cult band Tindersticks, who does the score for this, which serves kind of as this accompaniment to the unspeakable acts perpetrated by the protagonist. Denis explained in an interview with Jean-Michel Frodon that her film, as well as Irma Vep by Olivier Assayas, is a nostalgic yet playful homage to Louis Fouillat's silent crime serial. This is going to sound so Southern, but Les Vampires. Which came out in 1915 and 1916. I just apologize. I'm from the South. And its anagrammatic heroine, which is grown out of a later abandoned anthology project that Assayas was working on. And it also said that Denis had turned down an earlier proposition from an independent U.S. producer who asked several auteurs to direct a horror series. So that kind of also came from that whole thought process for her. She also repeatedly cites Canadian artist Jeff Wall's deceptively real life-looking compositions as generally inspirational, and some of Woodward's photographs as a direct influence on the gruesome finger-painted fresco, courtesy of her latest victim's blood, along with the haggard spectral core. She just kind of saw some of the artwork and how they created these compositions as kind of influence for how she structured a lot of the I guess cannibaling in this movie. 2 years after its U.S. premiere, though, James Quant, in an influential essay in Artforum, condemned Trouble Every Day as one of the examples of new French extremity. They kind of deemed it as purposefully shocking in its eroticized gore, if unintentionally dull in its lack of poetic frisons. We're going to kind of explain New French Extremity, I think, a little bit later. There's a lot of different connections to that. But when the movie came out, Variety called it overlong, underwritten, and needlessly obscure instead of genuinely atmospheric. And the Boston Globe said it is a success in some sense, but it's hard to like a film so cold and dead. Maybe that sounds a little harsh, but I will say I'm very glad that Darren and Diana, that you all are here. Because I'm going to be 100% honest, and I understand what was happening in this movie, but at the same time, I don't understand what was happening in this movie. If that makes any sense.
I was a little nervous to come on. I mean, I've seen it twice, and I don't think that I entirely understand what was happening in this movie either.
Okay, that's very good. I'm because I was very concerned coming, because I was like, I understand what I'm missing, like what I'm not connecting with, but I don't really know how to like explain why it was disconnect, like it wasn't connecting with me. I was kind of curious to hear what you all had to bring about the movie.
I want to let Darren talk first, because Darren is the big Claire Denis aficionado, and you are. And I found this movie because I watched it for the first time like 4 years ago, and I think I found it because I did like a weird Google search for erotic cannibalism. So like I didn't want to watch like Cannibal Holocaust. I love Cannibal Holocaust, but I didn't want to watch like I was like, surely there's got to be some kind of subgenre of cannibalism where it's eroticized, and that title kept coming up, and I watched it, and I loved Beatrice Dahl's performance. I wasn't so much into Vincent Gallo. And he's the main character you're supposed to be following. So I don't know. I always feel like I feel like I'm kind of missing something when I watch it also. I just really like her side plot. Like, like she's a bomb in this movie. Like she's amazing. But I feel like there are things that I'm missing certainly when I watch it too. So.
Well, Darren, I'm kind of curious because I guess we kind of brought you on because you are, I'm just gonna say, the Claire Denis fanboy,
For sure.
for lack of a better term. And I feel like I saw that you logged it on Letterboxd and you gave it 3.5 stars. So I feel like this is probably not your number one Denis, but I'm curious like how you feel overall about Trouble Every Day.
Yeah, I don't mind being called a Claire Denis fanboy. I mean, yeah, she's my favorite. She's my favorite filmmaker. Just sort of stop. But I think she's also like, I'm hard pressed to name somebody else who's been making films such strong films consistently for the past 30 years. I think like I'd be willing to argue that she's the best filmmaker of the past 30 years. But I do, yeah. Letterboxd grades are kind of a nerdy little part of our lives now. But like, yeah, it's 3.5 star film for me, which puts it near the bottom. And I was actually glad to have this chance to come on and talk about it because it gave me an excuse. I think I watched it 2 nights ago, and this is maybe the 4th or 5th time I've watched it over the years, which is actually fairly small number of viewings relative to like other Claire Denis films. But and I've always struggled with it. And so I was glad to have an excuse to watch it again and to kind of wrestle with my mixed feelings about it. I think Diane and I might be a good pairing in working through the film because I know that one of my biases against the film is just like horror is not my thing. And especially like bloody. What's that?
It's totally my thing.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. It's like, and so I'm much more comfortable talking about sort of how this fits into Denis' other, sort of her lifelong project and sort of some of her other formal interests. But I'm just totally unqualified to talk about it as a genre film. And so I think that's one of the reasons I struggle with it. It's just like, I think it's, if you're ever struggling to kind of understand your own reaction to a film, I think it's useful to think about the pleasures it gives you, And so like when I watch Claire Denis films, for me, the pleasures are like the way she looks at her actors and actresses, like the glance of her camera, the way she watches bodies move, that type of thing. And she also slips usually into like this subjective point of view. So even though, the films are always elliptical, there's never going to be a lot of dialogue pushing the narrative anyway. And so instead you're kind of experiencing the filmed world through the subjectivity of one of the characters. And, so that's like sort of one avenue of talking about this film. But then when it gets down to the blood and grime and the violence of the movie, that's when it's harder for me to like stay engaged with the movie just because of like personal biases, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So maybe that would be, I don't want to talk too much. Maybe we could start by talking about it as a genre film. Like, which of the conventions is it hewing to? How is it using them differently than what you all expect?
Yeah. Well, that's a great point because I want to start with Lydia because we talked a little bit about it last night. We were texting after you watched the movie, or this morning, I mean. But you compared it to a movie that came out earlier this year, Raw, which Jessica Carr wrote about earlier on Cinematary. And so I'm kind of curious, kind of comparing those and looking at both of these as these kind of genre,
erotic cannibal.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that when you said it, Diane, and I was like, I didn't find Trouble Every Day erotic at all.
Not even her parts,
although the parts that I did perk up were the like really horrible, bloody, scary parts when she was eating his face. That wasn't erotic, but it was definitely attention grabbing. And I think maybe the way those scenes got lingered on, that's like a really arresting performance. And then afterward it cuts to the like painting or blood smeared all over the walls, and then I didn't care anymore. I was like, oh, I see what's going on, but I don't get it. If that makes sense.
Right.
So if I could just like interject like real quickly, one of the things that is like a very Denis moment, and I think it's like it's playing with some of the genre conventions, but very much in her style, is after Alex Descas like rescues her the first time. I think it's the first time he takes her back and like gives her a sponge bath.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's incredibly, I mean, it's such a weird word to use, but it's a sweet moment between them. It's a very tender moment.
And she's vulnerable. I mean, she is terrifying and also vulnerable. So that's...
And also, I think that's the moment where she whispers to him that she's ready to die. Like
Yeah. This is the second time, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. I found kind of the doubling of the relationships to be odd. Corey and the doctor, and then I forgot the man's name, and Mr. and Mrs. Brown.
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot of tenderness in those relationships, but it felt very off-putting. I don't know, just combined with predator nature of the disease. And it made me intensely uncomfortable, even when it was like sweet moments, like even when nothing bad was happening. I was just like, I can't buy into this and settle. I can't settle into it, I think, which is probably the point.
So I've been thinking today. I'm already moving us away from the question I asked a second ago about genre conventions, but something you said, Lydia, reminded me of this. So. My friend Angelo Moreta, he's a critic in Toronto. I was looking at his Letterboxd response today. It was just like a one-sentence response, and he said, "This is one of the few films about sex and shame that doesn't announce itself as a movie about sex and shame."
Oh,
isn't that interesting? Like,
yeah, that is interesting.
I mean, you get that sort of head on with the Vincent Gallo character. I mean, he clearly, like, he's ashamed of,
yes,
you know, he's doing everything he can to protect the woman he loves.
Yeah.
You know, from all the deep inside of
nature and whatever.
Yeah. But I think that's part of that moment of tenderness and like tragedy in Beatrice Dahl's character's storyline also, is that there's she's ashamed of the damage she's causing, and it's sort of like it's something beyond like a metaphoric reading of, you know, the shame of real sex, but you know, or sexual passion or sexual transgression or whatever, because it's so visceral. Like I guess that's where the genre conventions pay off to some extent. Is like there's the discomfort that Lydia was just talking about, or like my natural tendency is to throw up all kinds of barriers between myself and images of violence and blood and stuff. And so that's kind of where it takes like this simple metaphoric reading of shame, the shame of sexual desire, and turns it into something unsettling and confrontational in a way.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because I didn't even kind of think of that while I was watching it. But I do think that I agree. It never. It doesn't really seem to condemn really anything in this movie, even really the cannibalism to an extent. I don't know if and so. I think that's kind of one of the I feel like we've talked about this multiple times on the podcast, but the ability of kind of making a movie within it just in playing to genre, because it allows you to deal with a lot of these various very various elements in kind of with under this umbrella of horror or romance or whatever you want to have it.
Yeah, each film you make in a genre it's not existing in isolation. It's sort of taking its place in this decades long sort of language and conversation of genre. Yeah. That's a great point.
I kind of feel like, though, the Trouble Every Day tries to have it both ways, because you can use the conventions of horror to kind of talk about these sublimated desires and metaphors for real things like sexual shame. You turn it into shame of cannibalism. And I think maybe that's what the essay you had mentioned very briefly in your intro fact sheet that James Quant had written. Like, this film, and I guess a lot of the other films he'd mentioned, puts these really explicit images on screen, both explicit violently and sexually, and maybe acts like it's trying to conflate them or say something about them, and it's too on the nose. Which it seems like that's what he's reacting against. The last sentence of it, it's like the authentic, liberating outrage is replaced by an aggressiveness that is really just a grandiose form of passivity. And because once the images are on screen, like, that's you can just let them hit you, and it's not having to really work that hard through it. Mm-hmm. Maybe.
I guess we can talk about New French Extremity to define it for the listeners. James Quant had written this essay on it, and he's referring to this collection of transgressive films by French directors at the turn of the 21st century. One of the I don't know. Again, I'm kind of pulling this from a Wikipedia page that defines New French Extremity. So I may be missing points on this. It also says that, while this term refers to a stylistically diverse group of films and filmmakers, it has been described as, quote, a cross. This idea has been described as, quote, a crossover between sexual decadence, bestial violence, and troubling psychosis, and it kind of has its roots in art house and horror cinema. They also kind of describe it, saying that this new crop of horror is something altogether entirely different, concerned as much with gender identity as it is with sheer taboo breaking of the screen images of bodies. But yeah, I mean, I guess kind of looking at New French Extremity and this movie, which seems to kind of be one of the defining examples of this term.
It's one of the more subdued and elegant examples of that, though.
Wow.
I mean, really, because I'm thinking of like Frontiers and Martyrs and Inside and a handful of other things that I've watched, and I'm like, this is pretty chill compared to a lot of other stuff I've watched. And I don't know. There's something about those very extreme kind of images, like this is like a really personal kind of thing, but like I am kind of comforted by those for some reason, and I don't know why. I don't know how to account for that. So I'm not really. Like, I watched Trouble Every Day, and I was like, this is kind of a lovely little movie. Like, this is sort of nice. Like, okay. So, I don't know where I'm going with this thought, but yeah. But I mean, I've seen it compared to other French extremist kind of things. And I mean, I watched Inside about, around the same time as I first watched Trouble Every Day. And I'm like, Inside is super intense and just blood and blood and blood. So much blood. Like, the entire movie is just like blood. And maybe like it's so extreme that it's almost like it's not as disconcerting because it's so over the top. And maybe that's what makes a movie like Trouble Every Day a little more complicated. Because it is normal in places, kind of, and sort of civilized. And then there are just these moments where it explodes into like crazy, bloody terror. And maybe that's worse for people. I don't know.
Like, I guess does do those kind of moments where you have this very vivid, grotesque violence or whatever, does that work to kind of convey this? Because it seems like a lot of these movies, you know, are trying to express social or political or philosophical commentary. Like, does that, you know, does the outburst of violence hinder you from, you know, digging into the I guess poor choice of words, digging into the commentary that the movie is trying to make?
So like the beat of what they're trying, maybe, because I tend to take everything very personally. So maybe I'm just reacting on like a very visceral, like personal kind of level. I mean,
yeah.
So I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I think the trick to answering that question, Zach, is I'm just speaking for myself, but, you know, you said, you know, is it being in service of the, I forget your exact phrase, but like the
commentary,
the ideas it's explored, the commentary it's making. Yeah. And I think, I mean, at least for myself, like I'm a little confused exactly about what the commentary is.
I would like to know what the commentary is.
And I don't say that like as a criticism necessarily of the film, although I was thinking today, I think that is one of my stumbling blocks with this relative to Denis' other films, is I feel like most of the other films, I could tell you what sort of the core interests of the movie are. And here, you know, even when I was sort of reading over friends and other critics' comments on the film today, a lot of them sort of never got too much beyond the idea of, you know, the classic horror trope of sex and violence, or sex and the death wish or whatever. And I'm not sure that if that's what it is, then I'm not sure that the film adds anything new to that discussion. But I do think that there are, again, you know, my comfort zone is thinking about this within the context of like Denis' stylistic interests. And so like, to me, maybe my discomfort with this film is because it's sort of short-circuiting the pleasure that I normally experience using the exact same techniques. So like, I love the way she looks at bodies, you know, like that's a weird thing to say, but it's more true of her than any other filmmaker I can think of. And so to like the way she shoots the violent scenes the same way she always shoots bodies. And so for it to turn violent is just so deeply unnerving to me. And so like my response to it there then is like, that's something else, you know, if we want to talk about the film of like what its concerns are, what its themes are, whatever, my response to it is sort of over here in another bucket. You know what I mean? And that one so dominates my understanding of the film that it's harder for me to actually sort of dig through the ideas. Like shame is a super interesting idea to me that I want to think more about. I was also thinking about, it was more clear to me this time than ever before that Vincent Gallo's character actually is telling in that weird scene in the lab where he's talking to the woman scientist. It's like the only time she appears, and it's like the moment of exposition in the film where he explains why he's there, how he knows the other doctor and stuff. But she asks him, "Did you have an affair with Cora?" And he says, "No, but I wish I had." And so like on some level, this movie is a love triangle between the three people who are infected and aware. And then Trisha Vessey's character is like, you know, she's the fourth wheel in this thing. So it's kind of interesting to think about the film within the structure of the classic love triangle, and how like a transgression within a relationship has, you know, like thinking through the potentially horrific emotional consequences of that kind of transgression. Anyway, sorry.
No, I kind of want to go back to the point you were making about how Denis shoots the violence, because I've been just kind of looking over notes on a lot of the films that are in this kind of movement or whatever, and it seems like a lot of them are what they're trying to do is rework how you traditionally view a horror movie and kind of the horror genre at large. And so when it comes to like those moments, you kind of have your reference points, whether it's like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or The Fly, or, these movies that have these very grotesque, violent body related scenes, and you kind of compare what she's doing in Trouble Every Day to those films. And I think you're right that there's this, because she shoots it in the way that she's traditionally doing scenes that are similar to that, it kind of creates this different feeling, this different reaction. So maybe that's why we have such varying reactions to how we should feel about those sequences, is because we're used to seeing it shot in this one way, and she's maybe bringing a more personal, more, I think we, just kind of, this much
she's
more.
She's not shooting as a genre picture. I mean,
exactly. It's almost,
she would make any other movie. I mean
exactly.
Unless you think of art house genres or art house conventions as constituting a genre, right?
Right.
Like the again, this isn't the style of movie that I seek out, but as far as I remember, James Quant's article was like incited partly by Bruno Dumont's film 29 Palms, which I'm a big Dumont fan and wrote about that film when it came out. And, that's another example where it was like one of the reasons Bruno Dumont like really shook up Cannes and the film world with his first couple films is because he was working within kind of the stylistic conventions of the art film. But then, yeah, like in 29 Palms, it's this couple riding a truck through the desert in the southwest of the United States, and this big pickup truck sort of knocks them over, and two big rednecks get out and they like sodomize the guy. And it's shot, but it's shot using sort of like these art house conventions of like, we're going to do the long uninterrupted take. It's like Gaspar Noé's rape film. Irreversible. Yeah, it's like we're gonna make you as a viewer sit and sort of watch this happen. We're not gonna sensationalize it or give you like the pleasures of the classic horror genre film.
Mm-hmm.
Lydia, you've been kind of quiet. Do you have any thoughts on what we've kind of been discussing with how it kind of threads these genre loops?
I think going way back to when you were talking about what maybe is the point this film is trying to make, I've been trying to think about what I found so disquieting about the doubling of the relationships that I was talking about. And to me, it seems the way that both women are treated is very infantilized. Like Vincent Gallo's character is very protective and sweet on his wife, but, really he's actually a predator in the literal sense of the word. And at the same time, you have Corey, who is an actual predator in the literal sense of the word, but her husband, Doctor, is very sweet and tender with her, even though she's done some like these horrific things. And I think what made me so uncomfortable is that both women were treated the same, even though one of them ostensibly is really strong and terrifying. And somehow that, I think, is what upset me the most. And not even necessarily the face eating.
Have agency.
At all. Yes, exactly. And even the character that should have agency just gets it taken away from her.
Should have eaten all those guys' faces off. Like, what the hell?
That's why I'm and so that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with sexual shame at all, because I think like the wife character really loves her husband and wants to engage with him, and it's this weird protective instinct that he has that maybe it'd be fine.
So I have a hard time, and again, this is Claire Denis fanboys speaking, but like I have a hard time. So like anytime Alex Descas is in one of Claire Denis' films, to me he's like he's the heart of the movie, and so it's interesting to think of like watching this movie without really experiencing him in other films, because to me those moments with him and Beatrice Dahl are so sincere and tender. Like he's desperately trying to save and protect.
But she wants to die. Like, and he takes just her having any choice in what's going on with her away.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are like boring narrative ways of explaining that, you know, like he's trying to keep her alive long enough to find the cure and those types of things. But
He's not going to find the cure. He knows he's not going to find the cure.
Yeah. But doesn't that...
No, I mean...
But doesn't that make it tragic?
Him, but again, it is like taking away her agency, kind of. Like...
But isn't that
and
that's
what horror films are all about, like a lot of times. That's another like genre convention.
Take you and put you in a room and all the windows are boarded up and you'll be fine. Like you'll totally be fine until I can get home from work or whatever. Oh, by the way, you just happened to like cannibalize a couple of guys that broke into our house. So what do I do with that? Like she just, it's just sad.
I don't know. I'm starting to like the movie more because that to me explains like the tragedy of their situation, like tragedy in like a deeply emotional, like inescapable way. Like in order to, you know, there's the classic scene of Vincent Gallo up on Notre Dame, like pretending he's Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
You know, whatever. And there is something Frankenstein and the monster about the relationship where it's like Alex Descas is trying so hard to rescue the person that he loves. But in the process, he's stealing her agency.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Oh, it is.
No, I mean,
also just terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we are on the same page, basically. But like,
I find it horrifying and not beautiful, but I think we're coming to the same conclusion about what's happening.
Friggin' things people, so yeah. Oh my goodness.
As we kind of wind down, any closing declarations on Trouble Every Day? I feel like we've done our best to kind of come to terms with our feelings on the movie.
Beatrice Dahl is amazing. That's my takeaway. She's incredible.
Do you mind? You mentioned that a few times. Do you mind? Like, do you have any elaboration on what strikes you about her in the movie?
I think there's something just like so. I mean, like the vulnerability and the fact that she's so feral and also even kind of playful in that scene where she cannibalizes that guy. Like, there's something so interesting and compelling to me about her, about that character, but also about that actress, having watched her in other things. Like, she's just the thing I gravitate towards when I watch that movie. Like, I just love her.
I think the scene of her walking down the stairs after the murder is the most beautiful thing in this film.
I think that part where she's like sticking her finger in that guy's throat and like kind slap in his
Oh,
face.
that's so gross.
I love it. I don't know how to explain why I love that so much. That really like hits me. Like, I just think she's great.
She's also really great in Claire Denis' I Can't Sleep, one of my favorite of her films.
I need to watch that. All right. I think she's badass. So that's my takeaway.
Yeah. Lydia, anything?
I don't think this general mode of filmmaking is for me. I'm probably not going to check out other New French Extremity. Yeah, it's gross and made me uncomfortable, but not in a way that some of my other favorite horror films make me uncomfortable. I wasn't enjoying it,
Yeah. No, I don't know if I agree with you that I don't know if I'm gonna check out any other movies in the New French Extremity. I will check out more. This was I don't know if this is a good starting point, Darren, but this was the first Claire Denis movie that I've seen.
Same.
And so I do want to check out more of her stuff. I know that there's a lot of other, much higher regarded work that she's done that I'll definitely get to. But yeah, this one just kind of just left me very cold. It wasn't that the violence just struck me and gave me just this very negative reaction. I never felt like it like a lot of what it was building up to built up to anything. I think I'm usually game for a nice atmospheric floating European movie, and this one just didn't connect with me as much as I'd like it to. I don't know. It just kind of, it's disappointing because the title song starts playing, and I really like the title song, and then it just kind of went down.
It's so good.
Yeah, and it just kind of went down from there. It never really found its way back. But I'll just say it did not turn me off to like watching more Claire Denis. I'm excited to kind of explore her resume, her filmography more. But yeah, this was, I don't know, not a great start.
And on a positive note, Darren?
So I will say, I was a couple weeks ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who has worked with Claire Denis a little bit, and we were this movie came up, and I said, I've got some problems, I've got some troubles with that movie, and he said, well, Claire does too, and he said basically one of the reasons, and I don't know if this is general knowledge or whatever. I hope that this is true. He said that basically one of the reasons she made the film was that she was kind of scared by the ideas that she was wrestling with, like that she did it kind of as a challenge to herself. And Zach, I'm jealous that you get to see all these films for the first time, but as you work through them, you'll see that she really has made very different films, always with her signature style, but if she has an opportunity to make a film quickly, she'll make a film quickly because something about it interests her. And so I can imagine her being intrigued, by the idea of making a horror film and seeing maybe what she could learn in the process.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I guess on that note, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on social media. We're at Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we log all of the movies that we talked about in this episode. Next week, we will be wrapping up our last movie for the October horror series. It is 2013's Djinn. Is it Djinn? DJINN?
Djinn. Yeah, I think that's correct.
All right.
It's by Toby Hooper.
By Toby Hooper, the late Toby Hooper. Since we paid some respects to George Romero, we're also going to be paying some respects to the late Toby Hooper. But yeah, that'll wrap up this series. If you have missed our previous episodes, we've done Suspiria, Freaks, Dawn of the Dead, and Candyman. Those are all on the website and on iTunes and such. But yeah, until then, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.